Ooh, very nearly, very nearly. The background picture has been moved to a safe place because it was being knocked around. We're moving around a bit and it was getting damaged. So I put it somewhere safe and I just couldn't be bothered digging it out to bring and film this. But it will be back at some point. So I hope everybody out there is fighting fit and well, or grin and bearing it anyway. So the Superfreighter, not a kit many of us would have built as kids. Maybe if it come with the cars and vehicles, might have done. But it's one of those kits that I had to build at some point in my life and it's been sat in the cupboard for years. So without any further ado, let's take a look what I did with this kit. A nice fresh box, with the odd exception. So let's see what we get in the box. So we get some very nice restrained surface detail, and it is a pity that all this will be lost through all that sanding to come. I would like to keep it, but I'm asking the impossible here. As well as that, we get this raised fuselage band, here to aid you with a brush way back when. A nice touch in its day. Sturdy pieces of plastic we have here. In fact, that goes for all the parts. I could throw this out the window and it will still be in one piece. The doors are movable, but I have in mind to show them open, which of course means showing all that detail in those doors and inside the fuselage as well. Wow, that's chunky. I'll have to look at some of the references to see whether this tail needs some slim fast. The same goes for the rear tail planes. Cockpit floor. Stiff and upright pilots. We don't need them. This will be my first issue trying to rectify the glazed parts. Made from treacle looking at them. Imperfections everywhere. And extra lumps and bumps here and there. So typical of me, haven't decided on a scheme yet. Knowing me, it will be a last minute decision. But the decals supplied here are history. So I want to make a new nose using these parts to create a mould. Why? Well, these parts are far too clumsy to show in an open position. They're just too thick and unrealistic. So while the glue is drying on those tabs, I'll make a start on the glazed parts. My idea is to create a new vac form canopy, incorporating some of the fuselage. As far as the cabin windows are concerned, I'll try and salvage them. So yes, a lot of work is going to be needed around these areas. Lucky me. I'm going to give a bit more depth here to the nose, so the vac form piece doesn't lose shape while sanding back. I need to fill some gaps here and I'm using super glue and talc to fill them in. And there are plenty of videos already out there showing this technique, if you're interested. So eyes down, here we go. My idea is to create a large vac form piece, so I need to sand back any detail or blemishes. After a coat of paint, I'm not happy with the shape or form of the glazed area or the fuselage. I need to come up with something else. As you see here, I've ended up cutting out some plastic shapes to help give me a visual form or visual aid and to help improve the kit part. So I'm protecting some of the areas here from the putty by masking some of the areas off. So the putty added, and as you can see, I've also needed to correct this unsymmetrical area around here with filler. I used super glue and talc to build up this area. So with the easy bit done, I've now got to sand a shape to this area. Oh joy. So I've added paint around these areas just to see how much more work is needed. Happy with the finished surface, I've sprayed on a couple of layers of Tamiya Grey. Next, I need to create some foam boxes to encapsulate the silicone rubber mix. I'm just going to let the glue dry before adding the sides. Foam boxes complete. The foam boxes added with PVA glue. Any gaps are also filled with PVA glue. So the silicone rubber that I had to hand has gone off. Well, the rubber has. So I've ordered some more, and because I live on the island, it always takes a lot longer and a lot more money to get here. Anyone would think I lived abroad. So until that arrives, I'm going to do something a little less interesting. So the tail controls. These areas do look very thick, but on the real aircraft they are quite chunky. But I've decided to thin them down anyway, especially around the trailing edges. Now if I thin down the whole tail, it will have a knock-on effect on these fillets on the fuselage. An area I don't want to have to tackle. So I'm going to be using the same method I used on the wing of the tri-motor build. So the tail parts are glued and it still looks chunky monkey, but when I sand the outside surface it will look better. Honest. The surface sanded. I had to add a piece of plastic to the elevator here as there was a large gap. I've glued the wings, and it is a pity to lose all that nice refined surface detail, as I mentioned earlier. The ailerons, I'll sand them separately. So the new silicone has arrived along with a broken mixing stick. Now even though the red catalyst looks okay in the old set, I'll play safe and use the new stuff. I've added just under 300 grams of silicone rubber. And now I need to add 30 grams, give or take, of the red catalyst, a ratio of 10 to 1. Luckily, I still had the mixing stick from the old set. After mixing the contents for a bit, I've transferred it to another container. I do this because sometimes the stick doesn't always reach both parts in the plastic cup, and it is pretty crucial you do mix everything. I'll clean up any tools later when the silicone has set. It's far easier. This cleanup also tells me that the silicone has set. Just need to tidy and cut off all the flash. Now before adding any resin, I've given the moulds a light coating of talc. This helps protect the silicone and also aids as a release agent for the resin. Talking of which, I haven't got much resin left. I'm not too sure, but this resin is probably well past its sell-by date. But before I go and order some more, I'll give this resin a go. I've got nothing to lose. You can see here I've also added a balsa plug to help me use less resin. So you can see here I've created a crunchy bar. Yes, the resin was long past its sell-by date as I thought, but as I said, I had to give it a go. Now the silicone moulds won't be damaged in any way, but I am going to have to order some new resin. A few days have passed, and with the new 2-part resin to hand, I'm ready to pour the mix into the moulds for a second time. And after a few hours I can demould. With the resin fully cured, I'm going to take, cut or sand this area off. I'm hoping all will become clear why later down the line. Trust me. Now I'm ready for the vac form pieces. So after a few attempts, the clear piece is done. This was a very scary procedure, that's why I haven't shown it. So I haven't decided definitely how I'm going to crop this piece. I will open up the front and back here, and I may trim off about 5mm off the sides. We shall see later. Just trimming some excess off the nose here. Now the better my cut, the less sanding I'll have to do. So with the clam doors cleaned up, I just need to fill it out by adding some detail inside here. Just, he says. So with the help of some evergreen plastic, I've added some interest inside these doors. Not 100% accurate, but it looks convincing enough, I think. Now I think some of these clam doors have a small window on either side. I know on the earlier Superfreighter they did, and there may be one on the later one. I don't really know. But for now I'm going to leave that off. Next, I need to get cracking on with this area. Now I know this is counterintuitive, but I need to cut this area off, and after faffing around deciding where to cut, I've gone for this diagonal line here. Let's hope I know what I'm doing. Stop laughing out there. This is a serious hobby. So I'm going to start with a cut by scoring a line first. I'm going to do this a few times slowly and gently, and then I'll use a fine saw. Now I'm going to have to use a bit of force around here, these corners, so carefully does it, especially near those fingers. So I'll need this to help cut out the vac form piece later. So after cleaning the cut, I need to clean the insides of various marks, but I'll leave the cockpit floor locating lugs on for now. Now the cabin windows are going to be added next, and there are a few ways to replace these, but I'm going to use my usual way of tackling these old windows by sanding them and buffing all the marks out. So I'm starting off by trimming the tab all the way around the window. This is so I can push the part out so it protrudes just slightly from the outside of the fuselage. With all the windows glued and sticking out slightly, I need to fill those large gaps with a mixture of talc and superglue. This will not only fill the gaps, but it will also add strength to those glued parts. But before doing that, I need to protect the transparent parts with a coat of this stuff. This will hopefully protect the parts from fogging from that superglue mix. Just add in some Tamiya tape. So the superglue talc mix has been added around the windows, and it looks a right mess, but I'll soon sort that out with a bit of elbow grease. My first pass will be a 320 grit. Now before wasting time using finer grits, I need to give this surface a coat of paint just to see if all the gaps and any imperfections have been filled. And as you can see, the coat has shown up some gaps that need my attention. Before I sort those out, I just want to show you how I'm going to tackle the new vac form piece. You can see I've been messing around with seeing the best way to glue PETG plastic to the kit's plastic. Luckily, extra thin seems to work on both plastics. So the part I cut out earlier will be used as a guide to show me where to cut on the vac form piece. So I'm using Tamiya tape here just to show you my train of thought, but I will use dyno tape when I do this for real. This will help guide the blade better. So the vac form part cut out, and I'll just show you where I'm going with this. Now this vac form part is one of the rejects that I've cut out. I just want to make sure all this works out before committing to the good piece. So with a bit more fettling, this should work a treat. So back to those windows, cabin windows. The gaps are filled and then a polishing cloth is used to get the best finish I can. This area is then cleaned and then a layer of Johnson's Pledge is applied by brush to finish things off. This is the same procedure as I used on the Fairy Rotodyne build. So with me showing the clam doors open, I need to show some interior detail. Hopefully I won't have to do too much here. So with some plastic sheets and evergreen, I'll add that interest. First, the halves are taped up so I can get the basic cockpit floor and lower structure cut to shape and in. So I'm going to be using the cockpit floor to mark off where the frames and longerons need to go up to. And I'll be using this evergreen to do that. Blimey, that was tedious. I've added a plastic sheet here just to hide the wing lugs, just in case you'll be able to see them through that hole in the nose. Looks better, and with a bit of paint, might even look good. I'll tackle and add the front frame later. Now the cockpit area I think is a lot bigger than this. I think it goes back further, but I've just blanked it off where the kit part ends. Now the crew seats seem to have disappeared, and I can't remember if they were in the kit or I've lost them. Either way, I'll have to make new ones. I'm also going to make some new yokes. Tamiya black first. Then a very light grey applied at an angle to the surface. I'm dry brushing Mr. Hobby's metal colour, aluminium. Now this could do with sealing in with a varnish, as the flecks do tend to travel everywhere. The cockpit finished, and I also found a spurious console on the internet. I've printed it out, reduced it to fit, and applied it to the plastic part. So let's put this fuselage together. I've added some reinforced plastic tabs to make the join stronger. Just dry fitting, happy that the tabs are not hindering the vac form piece. I'll glue just one side, let it dry, and then I'll glue the other side. One side is glued and dried. I've used a steel ruler with clamps just to make sure I get a smooth transition between the two parts. With most of the joins filled and cleaned, I need to add the front exposed frame. But first I need to trim flush this vac form area here. Just before I get on adding the frame, I received the decals from America today, from Airline Hobby Supplied. I had great trouble finding these decals for the subject, but thankfully Russell came to the rescue. So I've chosen this scheme, no real reason, but I've never used this decal from this company before, so I will be in for an unknown trip here. Might need to replace those Union flags, if I can. So back to that front frame. I've scanned and traced the shape and superimposed it on a rudimentary shape for the hole. Then one of these is cut out just to check it fits and looks convincing enough. Happy it does, I'll glue this on the plastic and then cut out that hole. Next, I'm trying to make some masks for the canopy area. I've used the resin part to give me a rough idea of the shape. This is scanned and drawn up more clearly. Now I was confused about the side windows. In the photographs it looks like they slide back onto the outside of the fuselage. But in other photographs it looks like they are a bigger window. So I'm just going to go with the one that slides back onto the outside of the fuselage. Masks cut out and placed. I'm still bothered about those rear side windows. While I'm in the mood, I need to give some more attention to those leg struts. The hubs for one look different, and the scissor link on the struts needs replacing. I've used plastic and aluminium rods to create some new struts. And the hubs need looking at. You can see here the detail is off centre and different to the craft I'm building. After rummaging around my spares box, I found these. The hubs look close enough to use. I just have to cut them free. The old face was cut off and the new one was glued on. Also, the strut housing was a very bad fit to the nacelle. I also need to give some finesse around this area too. So rather than that slab look, I've chamfered the rear cowl and the front of the nacelle. This gives me a more convincing gap. I will add some exhaust in later. So all the areas are given a layer of paint to spot for any blemishes. Oh, the scissor links are made from plastic card, by the way. They were a nightmare to build. I can now start to assemble this Superfreighter. Wings first, then the rear tail, which is a terrible fit, and I need to lessen that rudder gap too. I keep thinking I'm ready to add paint, and I keep looking at the photographs and see that I need to add other things. I need to add an anti-collision light and some aileron actuators. Hopefully that's it. Now these nacelles are such a good fit to the wing, I'll leave them off. This will make painting a lot easier. So the masks for the windows are drawn and then placed on the Tamiya tape and then cut out. I keep forgetting things like the hinges on the nose doors. These are cut from brass plate and then bent into shape. So onto the paint job at last, and I have to make a decision here whether the white goes straight across or I have the top colour of the wing break that white. Once again, the actual photographs aren't very clear. I'm also thinking at this stage of masking that go faster stripe rather than use the decals. We shall see. So the white mix is added with just a hint of buff. I was looking for the Tamiya deck tan colour, but the buff did just as well. So I was going to let the white run across the wing, which would have been easier to mask, but I've decided, rightly or wrongly, to break that with the wing colour. And for the wing colour, I'm using a dull aluminium mixed with a lot of white. The mix was applied, and just by accident I found that the surface colour marked very easily, even after being left for hours to dry. So I used this to my advantage by masking off and using a fine grit sponge just to mark the surface. Happy with the effect, I'll seal it all in with a satin varnish. I'm using this colour next for the lower areas. So I'm using a decal copy cut out to help guide me with the masking. So I've masked off ready for the grey, and it does all look a bit half-hearted, and in reality it is, I'm afraid. So with the grey added, I've decided to bite the bullet and paint the Go Faster stripes. I hope you can see here how I've cut that band into two parts. There are also some stripes under each side of the wing, so I've just given them a coat of white to help with the application of these light colours. I've been using the scan of the decals to help me with the position of the white band areas on the tail and the fuselage front. Now I've masked the doors off, and looking at the pictures it seems that the band doesn't come to a point on each side of the door. So now that I'm happy with the look of the band, the Go Faster stripe, I'll mask off the upper and lower parts. Now at this moment in time, I don't know why I've gone down this route. Wouldn't it have been easier just to use the decals? It seemed to make sense to me earlier on. But it's too late now, I've come this far, might as well go the whole hog. One thing that keeps nagging me is that I'll never get that pin sharp edge that the decals would have given me. But here I am, and I'm not undoing all this work now, even though my brain has decided that this is wrong. Now the lighter colour needs to be added first, and I've used a mix of deck tan with some yellow. For the top strip, it's almost a gold colour. When the paint has dried, I'll put the top mask back on, ready for the blue. I've skipped ahead here and added the blue, which is a mixture of flat blue with white and a few drops of olive drab. All demasked and a few touch-ups to do here and there. Just the anti-glare to add on the front of the nose. So I haven't sealed the paint in, and I've just given the surface a light sand, especially where the decals are going to be applied. And I've been experimenting with these decals using a piece of the Go Faster stripe. The decals are very transparent, so unless you've got a decal that is black, you will need to paint the background white for them to work. Now they went down very well with a little help from these two products. The decals come on one continuous carrier film, so I've cut them out roughly and then neatly cut around the decal to be used, making sure I'm only cutting the carrier film and not the backing paper. This will lessen the chance of a raised carrier film edge around that decal. With only one chance at adding these decals, I applied them in piece away from the camera. I found that I had limited time to apply these, in other words positioning them. Using the micro set and sole, there were a few heart-stopping moments. But I'm glad that's all over with and they all went down very well. So the decals will be left to dry. Any residue will be cleaned up before applying a coat of Tamiya satin varnish. The satin applied, and I will leave it to dry for a week or so as I'm going away, and when I come back I'll need to come up with something to add interest to this surface. So I've decided to mask off certain areas and add oils to break up that surface. This is quick and easy. Next, I added the exhaust stains, and looking at the pictures of the Superfreighter, it seemed to leak a lot. So hopefully, these messy nacelles will balance out those clinical areas of the Superfreighter. The ramp is next, and there are quite a few different ones out there for the Superfreighter, but I want to use as many of the kit's parts as possible. The ramp parts can be used, but the wheel parts are history. So the ramp parts are glued and I've taken all the surface detail off. And there seems to be no gap on this ramp. Also there's a small skirt on either side to add. I also need to add new wheels. There seems to be a single nose wheel with what seems to be a large bogey behind it. Yes, very funny. So the gap is filled with a single sheet of plastic card placed on top. And the skirts are cut out and these will be trimmed to shape later. I've added a couple of brackets that will need trimmed down later, and I've also added a brake in the ramp. The wheels are sourced from the spares box. The next thing I need to do is make sure that these wheels are glued in the right position, and for that I need to assemble the Superfreighter. This is so I can pair up the ramp with the opening. So with the glue set, I can match it up to the ramp. Just need to attach the wheels while the ramp is in position. Oops, this is going to be fiddly. With the wheels glued on and the nose wheel hanging, I can now paint this ramp. It is just a pity that there are no ramp decals supplied on the sheet. Black, off-white, grey. I've decided to use royal blue on the sides for no good reason, it's just a feeling. I'm going to cannibalise some of the decals to add to the ramp just to tie it up with the Superfreighter. And I also have, ready in the wings, some painted Tamiya tape for the anti-skid strips. Just the props and doors to add, as well as some small aerials. So the door's added, and there's a little fudging going on around here as far as those pistons go, but it is a symmetrical fudge. There should be some window bracing going across here on these windows either side. Also, I don't know whether there should be a quarter light window here on either side. And of course that rear window is in question as well. So I'm glad this is finished. It nearly ended up being put to one side forever because of the constant interruptions in life. So I'll take some pictures and I hope you like the end results. So thank you for taking the time to watch, and I do hope to see you later.